So we will continue to track those. I mentioned before that in development services, the administration made an effort to help have development services go out and help people with inspections while they were doing their regular job. Doing inspections, again, those will not be reimbursable. Inspections for the sake of inspections are also not reimbursable. So even though it was overtime, just that activity is not an eligible expense to FEMA for overtime. We do have the ability to recover those costs, but it won't be through FEMA because when we set the ordinance, once we knew all those, whatever was eligible that we could not recover, we would be able to adjust the tax cap one time for those expenses, which we would do next year once we settle down. So, and then there's the obvious ones where we have pipes and lakes, and then we have breaks and roads and buildings crumbling. Those are going to be, they are eligible for reimbursement. We are going to go through that process, and the best case scenario, they would be 75% from FEMA, 25% from the state, and any portion of that cost that's not reimbursable by those, that is a true cost to us, those two can be recaptured. So we're tracking it. We would be able to reimburse those as well.
For municipal funds?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
So we are tracking them very closely. Again, I get a weekly report, and then the more we learn about FEMA, we basically know that some things we're not going to be reimbursed for, and then we're tracking them separately.
Got to stop you there for a second, Mr. Hoover. So no, for the record, we've been joining Mr. Weddleton. Ms. Kennedy, you have a question?
Yeah, just the comment, doing inspections for the sake of inspections. Are you talking about we just kind of blanketly went out and checked everything, even if there wasn't something obvious?
So we had requests from homeowners and businesses and other places to ask us to help go do inspections for them rather than hire someone else. But most of our buildings were that way. We first obviously did our building inspections. We have a lot of municipal building facilities, including in the school district. And so those are the primary ones that I'm speaking of.
Okay, but when you were talking about the ones that weren't reimbursable, where you said something about inspections for the sake of inspections.
So
what is
people, they say I had an earthquake in my house, my foundation is cracked, or the building, can you come and do the inspection? Can you come and do an inspection on my home? So we did those as a result of the earthquake. We weren't required to do them, but we did them at the request of the
I see what you're saying. Okay,
yeah.
got it. Okay.
So people may be seeking insurance reimbursement, so we did it on their behalf.
Is there anybody online right now? Okay. Mr. Dyson, you have a question?
There were lots of homes that were tagged. Some of them have no permanent residence or not occupiable. Was it city inspectors that put those up?
I believe it was either our inspectors or our contractors.
Yes. And so those are reimbursable.
I don't believe, I will have to confirm, Mr. Dyson, because I think in the sense that we went out and did those inspections.
Because of the earthquake?
Yeah.
They should be.
I don't disagree, but I don't believe they are.
Okay. And then when the person wants to have that cleared or approved so they can go back to live in their house, your inference is that that was a part of routine inspections, but it shouldn't be a routine inspection. And therefore, yes, help me.
I think the and I can ask Ira and all of them to clarify, but I think the term of art is that if we were doing it for a safety, or we were just looking to see if it was a safety inspection, and we were going to make sure the structure was secure, because we thought we should do that.
No, but this is a request of the homeowner who may or may not have had the remedial work done and wants to get back in the house. Those very clearly earthquake related.
I would, again, I
Okay.
don't disagree with you. It's just whether or not they're reimbursable.
Yeah, all right. So in Ms. Kennedy's, in my area, there were a couple of roads, city roads, that are virtually impassable. Our local road board was waiting for some reimbursement to go through, and I think that's happened.
I would agree, yes.
Yeah, to the degree that that's correct. Appreciate your efforts to help our road board and our citizens.
All right, please continue, Mr. Wilbur.
I don't have anything else on the earthquake, but if you do have questions about reimbursement eligibility or those things, just send me an email and I'll get back to you promptly.
Could you say again, so we authorized that $30 million?
Yes.
And so my two questions are, what do we think the time frame is for receiving some reimbursement from FEMA? And then second, and I know this is difficult to answer, but what percent of what we are spending out of $30 million do you think we'll actually recover from FEMA versus have to refill ourselves? And when we refill ourselves, I assume that is through property taxes primarily.
That's correct. Yeah.
Will we raise the tax cap to do that, or will we? I know we set aside a certain amount every year anyway for emergency funds. Will that be sufficient to replenish that fund? Just a few questions.
So let's do them in reverse order. The way the ordinance was written would allow us to basically, as a one-time expense, just like a settlement or a judgment, in this case an emergency, to recover the amount that we spent. That's earthquake eligible, and then we have the documentation to do that. The 2%, that was part of what we used to set up the original 30.
Yeah. What if we didn't want to do that, to do the massive jump? What if we wanted to just take our time and replenish that fund using the 2%? Could we do that?
I believe that we could. The challenge will be when and knowing when and how much we're going to get reimbursed from FEMA.
Right. So all this should happen after we settle with FEMA.
And that could be years.
Okay.
I mean, I think that Texas and Florida, they're still dealing with hurricanes and I think the Matsuburg, some of the floods they've had 5, 6, 7 years ago, they're still trying to get reimbursement from FEMA and reconstruct. So when you ask me what's the percentage that we'll actually get reimbursed for, we're going to try for every single dime. Sure. But I can't tell you exactly how much.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to item B then, the general update on the budget.
So so maybe just to get the discussion started, I showed you so this is a 2-pager, front and back, labeled A and B, and this is an illustration of just general government. And this is a sample page of a report that we're trying to get, that we are working to get to the Assembly as an informational item in your packet for the entire year with more information. But I want to just show this for illustration. So on side A, what you see is as of the end of April, we were basically 33% through the year. We were 4 months through the year. And as of May 15th, this is the cost that we see. So you look off to the 2019 revised budget. That's the dollar amount that's included with the Assembly adjustments. The supplementals, any supplementals you have done, that's $6.5 million. That's the balance of the 7.9 that you originally appropriated to the CFO for the management of all of the expenses related to the ML&P sales, so legal issues, economic investigations, a variety of those things. We carried the balance of that over to from the same activity. We just moved it over. The column that I'll point to you is pretty much right in the middle. It says % of budget spent. So as of the end of April, if you look at the bottom, we were 33% through the year, and we were about 28.5% spent. The ones that are highlighted or bolded, those are the ones that are more than 5% off for one reason or another, just maybe timing. For example, the CFO, the reason it looks really low is because we added $6.5 million and hasn't spent that much. Moving down, the health department, it's under. IT, their actual amount spent is under, but when we go to the amount that they've actually spent or encumbered, which means reserved or set aside, they basically have either spent or encumbered almost half of their entire budget. So the percent spent, departments are doing pretty good, and then the portion of the table to the right is basically encumbrances, and those are primarily non-labor. Those are things they know they're going to have a contract, so they set aside that non-labor money. And if you go down to the bottom of that, if you look at the amount that they spent and the amount that they've encumbered or set aside, either spent or reserved, they are at 35% in total. You go to the back sheet.
Before you do that, Mr. Wilbur, just one that seems to jump out at me a little bit. Again, setting aside encumbrances, which I understand are for these contracts that might come to fruition a little bit later. Public Works seems to be running pretty hot. Can you explain why that is?
So in Public Works, Public Works Administration has all the limited road service areas. So all of the expense that they have in the limited road service areas as they're coming on with construction, they're managed out of PM&E, including Eagle River, CD Ursa. So that's why their encumbrances are really high, is because they're letting contracts out. Their contractors are letting contracts out to do work in the summer, so it's consuming their budget at a rapid pace at this time of the year.
Got it. Ms. Kennedy?
Same kind of question, but on the real estate line.
So real estate, similarly, 94% of the real estate budget is lease payments. And so all of the lease payments that we have to this building, Permit Center, all of the other properties that we lease out, pay a lease into, they basically encumber that money, set it aside for payments they either made or going to make the rest of the year.
The rest of the year, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you on the side B?
So just to divide it a little bit simply, if you just want to look at the labor, so the previous sheet was total money. This sheet just shows you how much we've spent on labor to date and then how much we've spent on non-labor. So the highlighted portion to the left is labor, the non-labor to the, and this kind of breaks it down by just the labor by departments. So from a labor perspective, overall they're underspent. From a non-labor perspective, they're about 10%, or about 6 or 7% over. But that includes what they've spent and what they've encumbered. So just a simple illustration. One of the things on this one here, I'll just point out for the assembly, for example, the reason that they look like they're 78% in their non-labor is because all of their non-labor is in elections. And so they consume it all in, basically March and April.
None of you resigned because you can't afford another special election.
So again, this is a simple illustration that I think will get you a little bit more detail about where we are in our budgets. The utilities, I have a similar report. The utilities, it's very early in the year. The one thing that I did notice is that their revenues are coming in. It looks like they are. They're doing amazing right now when you look at their books because the revenues are coming in faster than their expenses, which is a little bit opposite of how this looks. So when you look at the utility report, it's going to look like, how come they look so great? It's because the revenues are coming in and their expenses haven't incurred. So you see that. As far as overtime, the only ones that are on my mind right now are a little bit in finance. Police is at a little bit, like they're about 50%, and the fire department's at about 40%. So, we're keeping track on those, and just on their overtime. The rest of their labor, we'll be balancing that out. So overall, the departments are doing great in the middle of the year, or at least in the first third. I know Dan's not here, but I'll speak for Alex. The revenue report that you also get, you'll probably get the first one in June after the first bills come in, after we get it set. Typically in May, Treasury gives us the Treasury report, the revenue report. This is just on the spend side. And again, if you have any questions on departments, let me know.
Any questions on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Kennedy.
I'm assuming that some of these look, like this whole report might look very different at the end of summer, being a seasonal. So what kind of impacts do we really see in these departments over the summer season?
So the impacts will primarily be, from a seasonal perspective, they will be primarily in two departments, health and parks. I'm sorry, not health. Street maintenance and parks, because they have large seasonal employees. And then on the non-labor side, on the non-labor side, it's we're letting contracts out early in the year. It'll kind of dampen down, and probably July, and then it'll swing back up high in August and September because of procurement or purchases that are coming through after construction season. And then by the time the end of the year, the goal is to make sure that number is more than 400.
Mr. Perez-Urdia.
I just have a question. Again, new to this. When we're as a process in terms of looking at these variances and trying to get a sense of the reason for them, if they're high or low, based on where we are in the year. I guess my question is, has it been the process that we walked through those and you give justifications for each one of those, or do you write those up somewhere so it's just like a sentence saying, this is typical seasonal fluctuation, or this is something actually that has occurred that's off? Because in the world I work in, there's like a little note by every variance that's over a particular amount.
I'm a little guilty of giving you a preview.
Okay.
Of
So that's why I
a
was just
larger
wondering.
report that has a description of the 5%.
Okay.
So everything that's 5%, you'll have a written, whether they're plus or they're minus. And if we see or we know of something that's gonna show up that hasn't, we will note that as well.
Awesome. That's
You'll have it all.
that's great. Thanks.
Ms. Zoltan.
Thank you. What could possibly be, or I guess I'm a little confused, a municipal attorney has 78.5% of their non-labor budget spent? That seems really high.
So it could be that what side are you looking at?
B, sorry.
thank you. So,
I bet you would know.
Hi.
So on the municipal attorney, their non-labor budget in 2019 is about $1.7 million. They've actually spent $560,000.
Oh, I meant just the percentage.
Right? And then when you go over, they've set aside another $1 million they know they're going to spend on things
Good.
in the future.
Good.
Court cases are just in court, not necessarily judgments, but legal fees,
Okay.
contractual support. So of the 1.7 they're budgeted, they've spent 500.
But they know that.
They know they're going to do
nearly
it, so they've
80%.
set it aside for that purpose.
Okay.
That's why it looks like 78.
Fantastic, thank you.
Ms. Browse.
It's the requirements for their contractual services for public defenders and other entities. And Mr. Felsi, as the former municipal attorney, can give you more detail if you would like.
That's okay, thank you.
Well, so I'll note for the record, and Mr. Constant, that number actually seems pretty low to me if you were to count the amount of outside counsel we are using for the report. So I assume that's in some other account?
I think it would be in the revenue, the expense would probably be in the court's account. I would confirm.
It's definitely in the court account.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now we've been joined by my co-chair, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Any other questions on? Yeah, I noted that. Any other on this? If not, we'll move forward. Okay. Ms. Marshall? Yep. We're cruising along. Mr. Falsey, are you going to have a PowerPoint?
I'm not.
Okay.
Okay, super fast update. I go through a real quick break fix update on the SAP payroll side. As I noted last time, that we're focusing on IAFF payroll fixes, and those contractually are all supposed to be fixed by June 30th, and we're looking like we're going to meet our deadline. We've got 6 open defects, 4 are in testing, and 2 are in development, so we're looking good there. APDEA, that was a new contract obligation, and each defect identified in the contract kind of has its own target date, and we're looking pretty good on those dates.
Can I ask, when's the latest deadline for APPA?
I don't know. I think I take it back. I think it's the end of the year, like December.
Mr. Weldon?
So maybe we'll get to this. I don't know. Defects just means problem with the program. How many does it impact everybody, all firefighters?
It does, yes, and that's what you said, we will fix all of these by this time. Yep. Well, I shouldn't say all of them, the remainders, it could be that it impacts 30 people based on they have this special job that has this special extra tax, yeah, I don't know. There's really, I don't have that.
6 sounds small, but
Yes, 6 is
60
better than-
angry firefighters sounds like a lot.
6 is better than, it started with, I think, 24. So we're good. Yeah.
Very good. All right.
Um,
No, for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Rivera. He's still here.
Here's kind of this is a fun one, SAP licensing update. So what happens is every year you do an SAP, a license true up. So when you're in production, you run a tool and it says you're licensed to have 50 licenses that maybe can do X, Y, and Z special things. And what happens is you run a tool and then it says really you're using 51, and then SAP says please give me more money. And so what we have done is we've done our true up, and then we negotiated with SAP that a trade out. So there were licenses that we bought for modules that we never implemented in SAP, and you never get your money back. And you have to pay annual license fees no matter what. So we went into an agreement with them that we could trade those out. So if we're 5 over on something, we actually have licenses that we're paying for something we're not using, and we're doing a trade out. So it should be no additional funds.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Mr. Constant?
On the previous slide, did I miss the update on ML&E and what the status of those corrections are, or what the plan is there?
I didn't talk about that, but
'Cause I know that that's one of the unions, IBW, I guess, that has ongoing struggles.
struggles.
I think Bill's gonna,
That would be under this report usually.
That would be, well,
Never his report.
Okay.
are we good?
Okay.
Once you move forward, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
During Mr. Paul's
So anyway, the good news is that we were successful in our negotiations with SAP, and we can trade out licenses, and the net impact is 0 for us, additional costs.
Mr. Chair, can I ask
Oh,
a
yeah.
question about
Mr.
that?
President.
Is that just a handshake agreement? Is there something formal?
No, we've
So
formalized
is there an
it.
actual, so there's a way to quantify so that it's a fair trade out?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
there's-
so there's a lot of, what would you call them, like SAP best practices that they say they do. So basically, you said you were going to do this, let's honor it and put it in writing and have it formal. So that's what we've done. And it just took a while because even though they said they would do it, they still had to go back and check with their management and do all of these things. So here we are 6 months later, and they're like, yeah, we're ready to go. So we just have to be careful on how we trade them out.
Please.
Reports and knowledge transfer, basically. Initially, the last time I talked about how we have all these standard reports and we're testing them and we're trying to get them out to the users. And we've got a big group of them. We're going to put them into production this month and start training the population on how to use the standard reports that we found that are going to work in our environment. Right now, the knowledge transfer is happening with consultants to employees, so this is great. I'm excited about how it's working and our target. We are on target to get all that. We're not going to get every little piece of knowledge, but we are absorbing, and the team is functioning great, the employees. And then we've also started to take over help desk tickets. Originally, the subject matter experts were assigned help desk tickets. So I'm using SAP, I have a problem with my workflow that doesn't work. I send a note, it would go maybe to a workflow person in finance. So right now we've said, all right, we're going to take that workload off the subject matter expert and we're going to put it on IT now because we're starting to get the knowledge in our team and we'll be able to answer them. So our goal is to just continually help reduce the workload of the subject matter experts so they can just do their job and they don't have to do 3 jobs or 2 jobs. And and that's starting this month. That's it.
Good.
Anything else? Anybody?
Mr. Welton?
Maybe a little unrelated, but since you're IT, so my computer told me the other day that Windows 7 is going away and I have to switch to Windows 10.
Yeah.
What do we do here? Are we all Windows 10? Or
We do have some Windows 7 computers identified. I don't know the exact number, but we are migrating them. I think there's a handful of Windows 7 computers that need to stay Windows 7 due to the application they access. And that's because we haven't been able to upgrade that application yet. So for our we just completed this big project, and I think, I wouldn't say handful, but maybe I'll say 10 computers that have to still have Windows 7 on. And then we'll treat them differently, but it's a big security hole. We don't want to have it either, but we got to make sure. We can't just say you can't use that application anymore, so a little more to it.
in your professional opinion, wouldn't you agree that Windows XP was the pinnacle of
You're on the record, seems to be.
I know.
That's where I run my business,
This
XP.
is on that. Watch out for the security
really
risk.
like
We don't touch, those ones don't touch the internet.
Oh, okay.
It's all agreed.
It did change it up for sure. And I do look forward to helping you guys all at 1 o'clock with your email. So,
Yes, we'd be happy to get them.
letting you all know that.
Very good. Any other questions for Susie? Marshall?
Bananas or something.
No? Okay. All right. Pay corrections liability. Senator Farsley?
Yes. So as I mentioned last time, we're leaving the payroll group of the department to make charts because it was distracting them from the progress of actually getting work done. I tried to let Susie Marshall steal my thunder, and she did pretty well today. So she gave you the AFC and the IAFF and the APDEA update. To give you a little bit more of that flavor, a couple things. First, we've changed the words. We've rebranded. Apparently, defects are no longer really defects. Now they are RFCs, requests for change. We are fast tracking approximately 26 of them. We have 4 that are currently being configured, 3 that are in integration testing, 8 which are past integration testing and then actual testing, and I'm happy to defer to Susie to tell us exactly what that means, and then the rest are waiting to be loaded. That gets to Assemblymember Constant's question because this list includes all of the various IDEW fast track items as well. And as we've talked about before, these are way in the weeds things. So everything from your shift differential is generally not working correctly to you're supposed to have a 10-hour break requirement if you're IDW working in the middle of the night, to your leave is accruing incorrectly if you happen to be on a 12% shift differential while also working on overtime and also a member of APDEA. So I'd say the update that I'm hearing so far is that the real full court press trying to get these fast track ones done is working, and everybody's keeping on it. So we're hoping that we will meet all the promised deadlines that we've had, and then continue to clear this out. We'll have a fuller update for you on the other side of that effort.
Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you. Is there a deadline with regard to the IBEW ones? Because I have those questions in my email.
No, there is not yet a hard deadline, but we are trying to get it done as fast as we can. I'll also say, or if I can steal an off-topic agenda, a couple things that may be of Assembly members' interest. Folks have probably heard first that our first ever Human Resources Director, Karen Norsworthy, had announced a while ago that she's retiring in July. We have been very happy to convince Cheryl Evans to be the second ever HR Director of the Municipality of Alaska, of Anchorage. She is currently the head of classification in the department. She comes to us after a long service in the railroad and a few other public employers. I think she's in the category of people we snagged because she has some old PERS service that she needs to finish. So that's, I think, a good development. The other is, you'll see an assembly item in the next meeting. It's probably worth giving you a little bit of background on.
Hold on, before you do that, go too far afield. We had another question from Mr. France.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the update, Mr. Falsey. Does ABU, the plumbers and pipe fitters, do they have any open requests for change?
Yes, I'm sure they do. My list is written in code. So I have, for instance, plumber's GDL schedule. I don't know what that means. Shift differential on rotating shift. I have don't know, maybe I'm only seeing those two on this fast track list, but I can get more detail for you. I'll confess to you that the head of payroll, Renee Barron, is out sick today, so I have less information to pass on. But if there are follow-up questions, I'm happy to address them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions on the pay corrections before we go to this other item? Constance, do you have a follow-up? Mr. Dace?
Yeah, it kind of astonished me that the SAP system didn't accommodate the number of different payroll and all the different shifts and all that kind of thing. What did the SAP contract or supplier say about that? I mean, they came to us highly recommended and having done this kind of stuff for other cities. We can't beat that off beating weird. Why didn't their system work for us?
I think, through the chair, this is where you can pretty quickly dissolve into the finger pointing. And everywhere that we have looked and has implemented these enterprise resource systems have had a bumpy start getting going. And as often as not, the SAP, the software programs will say, hey, my system works, but I don't know what your payroll rules are. You got to tell me what your payroll rules are, and then I'll configure my machine to run that way. And we'll say, well, we gave you all the lists when we gave you the blueprint, and somehow it got lost in translation, and then immediately the finger pointing starts to work. Our work rules as a municipality are incredibly complicated. We have 9 unions, executives, and non-reps, so 11 different flavors of employee, and the work rules that you'll, if you open up the APDEA contract or the IAAF contract, I think I don't know if there was a tally of the total number of configuratory work rules, but it's got to be hundreds or even 1,000. So
it is more than other jurisdictions for the police department in particular.
Well, we're going, so it was the auspicious day of September 11, 2017, that was when we went live?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, not quite that bad. So we are pretty quickly approaching 2 years. You know, other jurisdictions have had these bumpy rollouts. Do they typically last 2 years, 4 years? What are we looking at here?
It varies based on the size of the implementation. We can get a number from the other locations that we have been in contact with over the course of the last few years, but there are different problems with each one. I think 2 years is probably well on the appropriate track with most of the other ones, but there are others that have had the program for 4 or 5 years and are still going through changes like this. And these changes will occur in an ongoing fashion no matter what we do, because every time something new changes in the system, we have to make sure that everything else stays safe.
Right.
So,
and we're constantly improving new contracts, so these things are kind of get updated, right? Okay. Well, if that's it on that, what's this item that you want to?
So a little color commentary on an item that you're going to see for introduction next time. Right now, the municipality has rules about the amount of leave you're allowed to keep in your account every year. You got to use it or lose it, and then it gets cashed out to you. The cash out date has always been December 31st. And we're introducing an ordinance to change that so that the cash out date is not December 31st, but I think it's October 1st. And the reason that we are doing that is because in practice, it is this unanticipatable bomb that goes off at the end of the year that everybody tries to accrue for but makes a guess, but you're trying to bring your budget in right on target, and then you just don't know how many people are going to ask for a bunch of leave cash out or be forced to take a bunch of leave cash out. So we're going to do a transition year where you have to use half of your leave through that amount and carry over a little bit extra. I think so far so good. Everybody seems to be on board with the idea that it smooths out payroll's workload, because that October 1st date is a quiet time of the year for them, unlike December 31st, which is about the worst possible time of the year for them. That it makes all of the department's budgets a little bit easier to predict. But it also comes with a caveat. The way our work rules work, we change AMC 3030, and that immediately is the rule for the executives and for the non-reps. But it's only the rule for everybody else if there's not a provision of a negotiated contract that speaks to it directly. In practice, just about everybody's, maybe absolutely everybody's, collective bargaining agreement says leave cash out happens on December 31st. But we've been touching all the unions, and seeing if we can't get everybody to agree to October 1st. Early signs are so far so good. So that's the impetus for why that's happening.
Mr. Webb?
So is the uncertainty because someone may take a vacation in that last quarter and you just don't know, so you can't plan? Or is it this $95 billion program, where do we spend $1 billion? Not keeping track of leave? Surely it keeps track of leave.
It's more the former than the latter. So we know how much people have to be cashed out, but we are guessing as to how much folks will carry into December 31st. So if you have 200 hours, you're only allowed to keep 180. I'm just making up numbers. We don't know if Lance is actually going to use his 20 hours until we actually get to December 31st. I mean, I guess we would know December 15th whether or not he's going to have to. But you're basically making average projections, and especially for some smaller departments, it can be a dramatic change. For fire, we actually are getting a lot better about saying, we're looking at historical patterns, we know it spikes in the summer, we can kind of predict it, there's always a little bit of stochastic noise. But December 31st is when we're really saying, count all the nickels, you got to come in on the budget. And for that to happen at the very end is problematic. And if it happened earlier, we would be able to
From a budgeting perspective, doing it earlier is not only going to help the departments, it will help us predict how they're going to end the year, and that'll be one less thing off the list of things that we have to, what are they going to do with that? Plus, I actually think it's going to be a benefit to the employees, because typically when they cash in extra leave, or forced to, they're doing it during the holiday season, and they would do it ahead of time. They have to do it anyway. I mean, if they're in a situation where they have to do it, they're going to do it in October, and not the last 2 weeks of December when they typically don't think about it, and then it just jams everybody up. So it's definitely going to help payroll. It will help our budgeting projections. I think once we get into the rhythm, it's a really good thing to do.
Mr. Wellington, and a follow-up, and then Mr. France.
And just in the phrase that you said, use it or lose it, it's use it or cash it out.
That's right. Then we have a non-cashable leave category, which is an annual use it or lose it. And then we have a cashable leave category, which is use it or it gets cashed out. And I think the thinking there was eventually it has to all get cashed out, but we don't want someone to retire after a 45-year career with the municipality, and then we owe them $1 million. So we're trying to make them leave it off over time. And while they're sort of at a lower pay rate.
Thank you. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So from all perspectives, there doesn't sound to be like there's any downside to it, but have you heard concerns from employees? I mean, what would be an employee downside if there was one to doing this?
Good, Chair. No, we think it's all upsides. We have not yet heard any pushback. So far, everyone has said it's sensible to us. I think if we didn't do the transition right, maybe someone would have a complaint, but I think we've engineered the transition where it's painless, so I think we should do that.
Thank you.
So will you just do updates then to the agreements with unions after that, or just do them periodically as you're doing updates anyway?
Yes, so, through Chair, our intent would be to catch up with either administrative agreements or new collective bargaining agreements that have an October 1st cash-out date. We are in the midst of negotiating 2 collective bargaining agreements now, and let's see what those turn into. But maybe those would be the first, and then we would have a suite of administrative agreements for each of the other remaining unions to try to get everybody on the same side.
Great. Any other questions on pay corrections or on the leave change? No? Okay, well, we have time now for audience participation. Would anyone? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hughes, we have time for other comments first. So other comments from Assembly members?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't see Dan Moore here, and I was wondering how the revenue is coming in so far this year.
Well, I think I mentioned through the chair. I think you'll have a report in. You'll have a report next month. It'll be the first opportunity where he has actually some data that can give you some analysis of how we're doing. We do that every year.
Hopefully legislature will pass the budget by then. Although, perhaps not. Okay, any other comments from my colleagues? All right, we have time now for audience participation. Would anyone like to participate? Yes, Mr. Aleva, why don't you come forward? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Let me know when it starts. I'm going to finance a new clock, as you know. Ronald Aleva, Grub State. I'm here to fill you in that I'm offering my property to sale for the city, which includes Robin Ward negotiating. But out of those negotiations, the offer went like this. If you sign this contract and sell at appraisal, we'll go out and try to find a nonprofit to reimburse the city on a simultaneous closing. We have 6 months to close. There's no earnest money, no money to move, and if you don't find a nonprofit or the monies to buy me out, well, I'm stuck with a vacant land and pay the taxes in the meantime. Not quite a rational thing to do or an economic thing. But during the last 2 weeks, several things have transpired where I have to get out, mostly because of safety. This issue with conviction, I'm very comfortable with that. I'll move forward with that. Today, Beans Cafe was disaffecting their parking lot. My heart soared. But moving on, it's why I couldn't accept that offer is it didn't make sense to me. Now, it doesn't matter because my life is at risk, and my staff and my family. Recently, we have break-ins daily, if not 2 in yesterday. But during the previous auction, we have 2 vehicles stolen. One raced out of the yard and almost killed one of my workers, which was tragic enough. And then the next day, a car was stolen from a pawn shop, drove down to Beans and Brother Francis, and intentionally ran over 2 people, killing one. So close call for me, a definite death for Beans. And because of this issue with the chlorine that I'm attempting to poison people, I've gotten death threats. Unfortunately, my brother, my family, and we get rocks thrown through our windows. It's a no-win situation. The second vehicle that got stolen was a consignor's truck. It was recovered, everything went well, except APD notified the registered owner. We had $400,000 in consignments. The way we had it structured, that would have been anywhere between $80,000 and $90,000 commission. And I'm struggling economically because I spend a majority of my time repairing my fences and fighting off the people surrounding my lot who are a constant threat, like having a laser beam put on you from a gun sight. It's not comfortable whatsoever. Thus, the heart monitor. They broke my heart, but they also stressed me to the point my diabetes is over 500, and this ticker isn't on an electrocardiogram anymore. It looks like a seismic graph, so I have to remain calm. But the truck, Weldon Construction, $400,000 came down to inspect the safety of their vehicle. Even after we got it returned, we have garage keepers, saw all the tents, saw the security situation that there was no win here, and canceled the sale and cost me $80,000 to $90,000. That's the nail in the casket, along with the upcoming fine, which, hey, if you don't have any money, fine me to the hilt. But I'm visiting a bankruptcy attorney this afternoon. So, opportunity for the city to buy my land. I have to get out. I want to get out. I feel like the city and their issues is like Don Corleone. You've made me a deal I can't refuse.
Thank you, Mr. Leyva. That's your time. So I guess the specific question I have, you're here at the Budget Finance Committee.
Get the money, and
So
I'm out of here.
Okay. And does the administration have any, Rob Ward isn't here, do you have any update on the negotiation to purchase this land?
I don't.
Okay. All right, well, perhaps we can get that item, if something comes before us, we'll talk about it. If there's an item before us next month, we'll put it on the agenda. But we don't have something in the administration that can speak to that specific issue today.
Okay, but does anyone have any questions about the desperateness of this? And should you like to write a letter to the judge to my character in fighting the homeless? I'd appreciate it from any and all of you to realize that there was no intent to harm. Just never mention salaries to homeless coordinator or the executive director of Beans. I believe it's a personal vendetta. I have a level 4 in sewage treatment. When I see an open sewer, calcium hypochlorite is used in 60 to 80% of the water treatment plants and the sewer plants in the state of Alaska. No harm was intended. They got me on a pesticide because I didn't have the hazmat, but they threw out my certificates with a college degree, a degree in wildlife,
thank you.
and also the certificates that you got to pass the exam.
Thank you, Mr. Leva.
Did you have any questions? I'm willing to stay. You irritate people that you have to 1 o'clock to hear me out.